Welcome to Unsilent with your hosts Dave and Brian. This is not another current events podcast. We're digging deeper, diagnosing, and discussing what's really going on today, how we got here, and providing observations for future generations.
Welcome to Unsilent. We're Brian and Dave. We'd love to hear from you where you think we got it right, where you think we got it wrong, and any comments you have on the things that we're sharing, which you can do on rumble.com or unsilentpodcast.com or your favorite social media outrage platforms. So, Brian, what's going on in your neck of the woods?
Well, I mean, here it's nice and warm because I live in Arizona, but I did come across a few stories that are a little fun, and you got a couple topics you want to get into as well. But the one that stood out to me this week is the Democrat Party is spending $20 million to learn how to speak to men because they realized they lost men in the last election cycle. So in typical 2025 politics, the solution is to hire a consulting group and go to a retreat somewhere on Martha's Vineyard or whatever and come up with a plan to talk to young men and spend $20 million of people's money that they donated to the Democrat Party to win elections. Like, this is where that money is going. So
wow.
What have you not heard of this?
No, I haven't heard of that. And I'm just, if I'd heard of that in advance, I would have submitted my my bid, because it seems like that would be a fairly easy thing to go talk about for a while. But maybe the people that
I'd tell them for like 5 million. I mean, I don't need 20.
I'll underbid that at 4.5. Let's go.
So if you were the consultant they hire, now I'm springing this on you. I thought this was pretty widespread news, so I'm springing this on you. But what is your step-by-step plan, Dave?
Okay, step one: realize that men are the original hunter, and they were out killing stuff. So think of men as Neanderthals. You're gonna have a good start with that. Realize that for you said young men, they're commissioning this in young men. Okay, so
I believe I'm not 100% positive on that. It might just be men. I think it is just men. Sorry, I don't think it's young men specifically. I think it's men. Yeah.
Well, if it's young men, anybody say under about 40, then the most important thing they need to realize about them is there's about 15 minutes each day that they're not thinking about sex. So that would be important to sort of feed into the thing. When they're,
okay.
So there's that. I guess.
So wait, hold on now. Now I would argue that they had Beyonce heavily involved. They had Taylor Swift heavily involved. Like, what do you think they're selling? I mean,
well, but of course, what are they? What are they? I mean, what is Beyonce? What is Taylor Swift? They don't know that. So we have to start with something maybe they can figure it. Well, so I guess the first thing I would do is I would do an exercise like, man, let's define what a man is. And that'll be about half the time. So
you see, you're gonna get into an area that's pretty dangerous. You're on shaky ground right out of the gate.
I'll just burn up half the consulting contract just on that one question.
Yeah, I mean, I guess to clarify, consulting contracts don't require any kind of guarantee of outcomes or results.
Right. Just
the process is the benefit, right?
Yeah, exactly. So
getting to check the box and say we did this thing that's the outcome, not actually changing hearts and minds, right?
Yeah. Well, the outcome is we went to a place, we said some stuff, and at the end we left the place. There's the outcome. So now where's my $4.5 million?
Well, I'm gonna posit my approach, and I think it's basically just it might be 2 steps, but I think it's just a 1-step approach.
Okay.
I think that they're spending $20 million to figure out how to talk to men,
right?
Because men, by and large, shifted away from them in the last election,
right.
and the trend is not good, and their favorability, I think, I saw a couple of days ago, was like 19% or something like that,
right?
Across the board, not just with men, right? I think the crux of their problem is they are intent upon delivering a message rather than being intent upon hearing from the constituents who vote for them what message the constituents would like to be carried forward. So my 1-step plan would be stop trying to talk to them and start trying to listen to them.
Listen to them. Absolutely. Well, that's probably worth $30 million right there.
I mean, listen, I can send my PayPal or whatever. You know, I mean,
Yeah,
I'm down
absolutely.
for whatever they want to contribute.
Go for it.
I don't have high confidence they will follow that plan.
No, no,
It
no.
seems to me like they're doing everything they can to avoid the obvious, which is we just need to have a more compelling way to present our solution rather than we need to figure out how to learn what people actually want and do that. That seems to be the disconnect to me.
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of a political science 101 thing, right? I mean, maybe figure out what the
Well, in the old
people,
days, yeah.
maybe figure out what people who elect you to serve, quote unquote, them want, and then go with that. Yeah, pretty simple.
Yeah. Okay. So next thing, there was a study that came out. Again, this is on X. I don't know how it looks. Fairly credible. But it's the share of Americans who say they have a great deal or fair amount of trust in mass media by political party. And the three political parties are Republicans, Democrats, Independents.
Right.
So you and I didn't plan for this ahead of time.
Nope.
I'm guessing that you're not familiar with the outcomes of this
Nope.
poll. How would you rank those Republicans, Democrats, Independents? Who do you think has the most, middle, and least amount of trust, a great deal or a fair amount of trust in mass media?
So the most would be the Democrats. The next down would be the Independents. The lowest would be the Republicans.
Yeah, and the spread from Democrats to Republicans is 42%.
Up, so I wasn't too far off. Yeah.
54% of Democrats have a great deal or a fair amount of trust in mass media, and 12% of Republicans.
Yeah. Well, that pretty much sums it up, doesn't it?
And Independents are kind of they are closer to Republican. They're 27%, so half as much as Democrats. So
yeah.
So I think that that's a good representation of, like, the what is it, Threads? Is that the Facebook version of Twitter? Is that what that is? That is not a dominant social media force like X is.
Yeah, for sure.
So people who are tending to trust the media are still watching TV and catching YouTube clips of the CBS News or whatever it is, and people who aren't are by and large taken to social media. That's my perception, at least.
Well, I think that, in fact, I don't know the exact numbers off the top of my head, but I was reading that someplace that the percentages of people whose primary news source is TikTok, as an example, it was like in the 20s, 30s.
That's crazy, isn't it?
Something like that as a news source. So certainly the media, it's self-immolation. I mean, they've basically set themselves on fire and burned themselves for everybody to watch. So, they've done it to themselves, but basically what they've done is they've created entire new outlets and the problem with creating entire new outlets is every one of them stovepiped. Whether it's a right-leaning outfit or a left-leaning or whatever, people only listen to the things that they listen to, and with completely the weird thing is, we're going to talk about the Russia thing in a little bit, but the weird thing to me is that people have completely different sets of beliefs about how the world actually is, the physical state of the world. Yeah. I was talking to somebody on social media about, Putin and all that. And this person said to me essentially, well, I've heard that Russia today is kind of like America was in the 1980s. It's kind of, everybody's friendly and it's middle class and, everybody goes to church. And I'm like, what exact world are you talking about? I mean, this is a completely different view of reality than, as I understand, at least exists. So that's the downside of the collapse.
I think it'd be fair to say that, like, as far as how clean the streets are and people being courteous to each other, that probably is similar to America in the 1980s. But how their culture works and how their economics work, and I like, for example, I don't know. I imagine if you said, like I remember, when Reagan and Bush, especially Bush, with the war in Kuwait and all that stuff. There was plenty of protesters who were saying things like "F Bush." I don't think you could pull that off in Russia today.
No, well, you could do it once, and then it's, you do anything you want on your last day, and as
you do anything
Russian.
you want one time. That's the differentiator between Russia today and America in the 1980s.
Yeah, exactly.
The only thing you want in both cases. In Russia, you can only do it once. So.
Yeah, do it once. Exactly right.
I like it. I like how you cleaned that up for me.
Yeah.
The next thing, and again, for those listening who are not familiar with our format, Dave and I are explaining to future generations what it feels like to live in this moment, as they will no doubt look back and wonder what the hell we were thinking as we go through this fourth turning crisis era, and move into the next era where there's more stability and get out of this chaos. But we're going to get into the mounting problems in Russia and Ukraine, and which kind of seemed like they'd kind of fallen off the radar for several months or a couple of years. Even though it's kind of like plateaued as like but now it's ramping up. So we're going to get to that. But it seems to me that you and I are always talking about like what's the trigger going to be? Like
right.
we're in this crisis era. Things are very unstable. I don't know very many people who believe that things are stable and like think we're just gonna like in a few weeks like pull out of this and be moving forward.
Right.
Politicians talk that way, but I don't know. Sure. I don't know civilians who have that mindset. Right.
Right.
So how to navigate the burden and risk of the national debt is now kind of front and center in our politics. Right.
Right.
Elon Musk, who was, tremendous supporter of getting Trump elected, arguably a big role in getting Trump elected.
Yep.
Very favorable for, Republicans going into the election, like did rallies, all this kind of stuff. And, Trump has this big, beautiful bill that he's pushing as like this one bill that's going to solve a swath of problems and we're going to move on. But it's again, kicking the can down the road of the debt.
Yeah.
And Elon, as you and I are recording this yesterday, came out and said that bill is an abomination.
Yeah, I saw that.
So, now he hasn't been like quiet about that up to this point. I think there's been. I think Trump knew where he stood before. I don't think it was like a revelation for Trump, right? But so a couple of things are happening here that one, this Doge thing goes into place and they find all kinds of waste. Like the Treasury Department, I think, sent out, was it $5 trillion worth of payments with nothing in the memo line saying what it was for? Like just literally a blank check, sent out to who knows who for who knows what.
Right. That
level of things were discovered, and like all the fraud and people getting money that like can't explain. You don't know why they do it. Like just obscene. I think the way he put it was, if a private company had a board of directors operating this way, they would be delisted from the New York Stock Exchange and all be in prison. Like that level of just ineptitude or corruption, however you want to look at it, right? So there's coming apart in a couple of ways. You got camps in the Republicans who just like get this bill done and then we'll tackle it next time, like the same thing we've heard for 40 years
every time.
And you got the cohort that's like, nope, this is our line in the sand. We're not doing this, not even one more time. Even though we love all the things about you, Donald Trump, we're not doing this thing one more time. So it feels like there's a stalemate there.
Yeah.
And if Trump with his personality is lashing out at those folks and whatever. But Elon comes out and says, anybody who signs this, I'm going to make sure you get primaried. I'm going to spend whatever it takes to get you primaried in the next election. You will not be reelected if you betray the American people like this. I'm paraphrasing, but what do you make of all that?
Well, I mean, I think Elon obviously is brilliant. I mean, whatever you think of the dude, he's brilliant. And he went into government with a very specific idea, which was saving money, because he's got 1,800 kids or something like that. I'm sure he's concerned about the future of Muskville out in Texas, and rightly so. So I completely agree with him. Now there's a bunch of people. Part of the nuance to this conversation is there's a bunch of people speculating. Well, he didn't get his NASA administrator that he wanted in, and there's cuts for EVs. There's all this other stuff. And maybe yes, maybe no. And I don't care. It doesn't really matter. The thing that really matters here is that he is right, and that hopefully, I mean, he's hopefully from his perspective, from a kind of influence perspective, he doesn't burn too many bridges with this, because he is right about we have to cut the spending. We have to, this bill doesn't do anything for it. It just raises the, I mean, I'm happy to keep the tax cuts, on a per personal selfish basis, yeah, I'll take those things. But I also know, you and I were talking offline the other day about Social Security because I'm entering that range. I also know that I'm not going to get all my Social Security, and dude, I don't think you're going to get yours either.
Yeah.
Not the
Yeah.
full amount of it. So
Well,
I'm
last I
cognizant
heard,
of
it's
that.
supposed to be defunct by 2033 or something like that. So I'm gonna miss it by a long shot. Yeah.
Yeah. So the bottom line here is, well, the psychological question for me is he really going after Trump, or does Trump know he's going to do this, or what's going on here? But
Is this a script they hammered out 4 months ago, and we're
right,
just seeing it play out? But they kind of had this plan.
right,
I don't know, and I certainly wouldn't say that's not possible.
right.
I to me, it's the natural manifestation of the weakness of our system, and what I mean by
Yes.
that is, for once, I'm going to defend the politicians, not because I think that they by and large do a good job, but what can they do here, right? So,
Right.
like, what are the possibilities for them? They either approve the bill. Let's see if you can get them all to act as one unit. They
Right.
approve the bill and spend more, kick the can down the road, and swear and maybe even earnestly believe that we're going to solve this problem next time. But then some emergency will come up and they won't. And we've
Right.
been doing this for 40 something years, 50 years, whatever, whenever we took ourselves out the gold standard was like one of the moments where like
Yep.
this spending kind of got out of control. So they do that. They pass the bill and pinky swear they're going to fix the problems and then don't. Okay, everybody knows that. Or they turn it down.
Right.
And don't do these things. Well, the populace isn't going to like either one of those options.
Well,
Like,
no.
you can't be reelected if you say, you know what, we are drawing a line in the sand here. We can't continue spending like this. And I know it sucks for you, Dave. You're a few years from retirement, but listen, Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, like, those are huge expenses. National defense, like what, these entitlement programs, they got to go.
Right.
Well, that person will not be reelected. Period.
Right.
End of story.
Yeah.
Right. So what the hell are they supposed to do? Like, this is a no-win situation. And again, I'm not saying that by and large politicians do a good job. I don't believe that at all.
Right.
I think that this is a result, though, of our culture, which wants the easy thing now.
Yes.
That's just how we are. We want the easy thing, not the right thing.
Right. It's microwave ovens. It's microwave ovens. It's like when microwave ovens came out in like the 70s, it's like, whoa, all of a sudden we can save some time and watch more TV, and mom doesn't have to cook as much. And so we take the comfort. It's a result of our affluence and our desire to take advantage of all those wonderful things that we've built in this great egalitarian society. And it's not, and you're exactly right. It's not going to change. The only thing that's going to change is when things devolve enough so the people say, well, we have to cut this, or else we're not going to have any tanks. We're not going to have any drones to defend ourselves, or whatever. So that's exactly right. They have no choice.
But to do what?
They have no choice but to pass the bill. I mean, because Trump, first of all, if this bill doesn't pass, the tax cuts are done. I mean, it was part of the original Trump tax cut bill.
Yep.
They were temporary. They sunset, and they will sunset unless this bill or something very similar to it passes in a very short order here. So. Yeah. And then Trump's over. Trump's completely done then. He's a lame duck president. He'll just spend the next 2 years grousing. The Republicans are done.
Doing executive orders that probably won't get codified and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and they'll just get turned over at the next president. The next president will probably be a Democrat, because the Republicans will be hated for pushing grandma off the cliff. So you're exactly right. The incentive structure that we have in this country is set up, or it's no, actually, let me rephrase that. It wasn't set up to do this. But what happened is people who were manning the till essentially got lazy and allowed weaknesses in the edifice of the system to be exploited, so they didn't have to make hard decisions. I mean,
well, they changed our structure in a few different eras. From, you have freedom, which means you have a tremendous amount of personal responsibility. That's what the predicate idea was when the country was founded.
Exactly.
Now that's not the predicate notion anymore. The predicate notion is do your best. If you don't do well, we're here to bail you out.
That's right.
Especially if you're a big Wall Street bank, or even an individual. Like, we'll give you a modest amount to get your single wide trailer paid for every month if you're an individual.
Right.
Right. But the we just borrow and placate, borrow and placate.
Right.
That's the system now. That's not what it was intended to be.
No.
And you and I don't have time to go into all the reasons, but now they're boxed in. And like, part of the reason that I think these fourth turnings unfold is because we get ourselves in these situations where it's just not realistically possible to avoid it. And I think this is one of those things that, like we're going to get into the Russia thing later on. That's another thing. Like, how are you going to avoid that? Like, and this is a thing. And how are you going to avoid the thing in Israel and Gaza and all these things? So we have this tinderbox of just things going. But so one of the things that I saw that this just, it kind of was jarring. It was trying to put in context what $1 trillion is.
Yeah.
Right. Like we think we can understand it, but we can't really understand it. So this guy did. I thought this was pretty fascinating way to explain what $1 trillion is. 1 million seconds ago, this is as of yesterday. 1 million seconds ago was May 23rd. And you and I are recording this, in early June.
Right.
Right. So 1 million seconds ago was late May, less than a month ago. 1 billion seconds ago was 1993. All right. 1 trillion seconds ago was roughly 30,000 BC.
Oh my word! Yeah, we think of it in terms of 10 times this, 10 times that, or 100.
Like
times.
it's a lot of billions, but like when you like when you put in something you can like feel and measure like seconds, it's like wait a second, like the amount of money we're talking about is staggering.
Yeah.
It's overwhelming, unbelievable. Not the again all the interest and all that stuff. I don't want to get into all the weeds and that stuff, but it just seemed to me like we're just painted into a corner. There's no peaceful resolution where people will be happy and politicians will get reelected. Like there's no options available on the table that would do any of those things.
And you see, I was listening to another podcast that was talking about societal evolutions like the one we're going through. And they weren't talking about it from a fourth turning perspective, but it overlays very nicely. And one of the things they were pointing out was that, things when they get so complex, inevitably, kind of collapse under their own weight and they get simple again. And so what the first turning does is it makes things more and more and more complex, more and more and more complex. And we get all this stuff and we get all this complexity and ease of use and, snap your fingers and all these things happen. But eventually it gets so complex that it has to simplify. It's in science, you get the second law of thermodynamics. Things run from organized to disorganized. And we got to peak complexity, and then it started to collapse. And the only way, yes, you're right, the politicians can't fix it on the way down. You can't fix a collapsing edifice. So they and I'm sure they know this. I mean, the people that are back there that are voting for this bill, I'm sure Trump, they all know that this is not going to fix things long term, but it's going to keep things going. It's sustainable for a time, and then until it becomes unsustainable.
Right. And like you and I talked a few months ago, the saying that the purpose of a system is what it does.
Right.
Well, what's the purpose of this system? The purpose of this system is to borrow and placate until you can't anymore.
And to perpetuate itself until it collapses. Well,
because there's nothing in the system to prevent this.
Yeah.
The system is designed to go at this pace until it's not sustainable anymore, and then bad things happen. That is what the system is set up for. And it might be an oversimplification, but it's absolutely true.
So basically, we're standing on Mount Etna in Italy right now. It's about to blow up, and for Kenny G, look it up. It's a big volcano.
I would say it's more like we're standing. We're somewhere around where your house is, somewhere between Mount St. Helens and Mount Rainier. We're in a spot between them, and either one could blow.
Either one or both simultaneously.
Yeah. Are you going to run north? Or are you going to run south? Are you going to run away? Are you going to? Is the economy going to do it, or is it the war in Russia or something like that? Right?
Yeah, exactly. There's no safe place.
So, last thing here, this is Musk going pretty much all in.
Oh yeah.
Call your senator. This is a quote from him on X. Call your senator. Call your congressman. Bankrupting America is not okay. Kill the bill. That's a post from him. Yeah. And then simultaneously, not simultaneously, but within a few hours, You've got Trump saying we should get rid of the debt ceiling entirely because it's just a big hindrance. It's like,
I didn't see that. Oh my word. Oh my word.
well, and this is, by the way, like the only thing him and Elizabeth Warren have ever agreed upon ever is,
Yeah.
let's just get rid of the debt ceiling. Well, because you can always just print more money or just borrow more. And it's like, holy smokes, that the only thing that kind of sort of even as a speed bump on this is the debt ceiling, because every
Right.
year they have the threat of closing the company, or shutting down the government. This is the only reason it even comes to that point. Without that, we're 37 trillion now. Again,
Yeah.
a trillion seconds is 30,000 years
30,000
ago.
years. Yeah.
We're $37 trillion in debt. If we didn't have a debt ceiling, we'd probably be 100 trillion or something. I mean,
Yeah, well, we would quickly find out. You know what we would find out? We would find out where the limit to the world and people's appetite for buying U.S. debt is, because
yes, 100%.
there's only two ways we can get the money that we need. We can either borrow it by selling bonds, but the recent
Yep.
bond auction, without getting into the details, didn't turn out quite as
Nope.
rosy. So, and eventually people are going to be, no, I don't want to buy American debt. They've been downgraded.
Yeah.
And then the only way to do it is inflate your way out of it. And
Yeah.
there's your crisis.
Yeah, it's going to be, it's just, I don't know. Again, going back to when you and I first started doing this, like what was it like for the people who lived 3 miles away from Auschwitz? How come they
Right.
didn't say anything? I imagine we're in the same situation. Like
Yeah.
we do say things, but it's gotten to the point where it's just it's on its own path now. Like it's this snowball that's built up such momentum that nobody's in control of it anymore.
No.
Everyone's trying to claim that they control it. They all know they're full of shit, probably.
Right.
We all know they're
absolutely.
full of crap.
Yep.
Like, and it's just its own animal now.
Yep.
It's what it feels like to me.
Well, that's I think what it is, and that's why also these tourneys, these generations, these saculums, as they call them in the fourth turning in the books that are related to it. They are, well, why doesn't anybody stop them? Well, because these are the waves of the societal ocean, and we're all drops in the ocean. The drop doesn't say to the ocean, no, let's not take the tide out this time. The moon's pulling it along. These are inevitabilities that come to pass. We don't want them to, and maybe someday we'll have the ability to overcome them. I doubt it, but right now it is all inevitable, and it sucks when you think about all the challenges we're going to have as a result of it.
Yeah. Well, so anyhow, speaking of being stuck between Mount Rainier and Mount St. Helens, you wanted to talk about the uptick in the Russia situation and also the change of technology.
Oh yeah, so this is fascinating to me. I don't know if have you seen the map where all those locations were that got hit? So
I saw the video of the planes being hit by the drones, but I didn't see a map of where they were.
So so basically Ukraine over, and they say, and I don't have any reason to doubt them. I don't have any reason to think they're lying, but they positioned drones all across Russia, north of Moscow, all the way out to the west, just north of China, into I think it's in a Siberian town, but Siberia goes all the way down into some really nice areas, but all throughout Russia in these air bases that were attacked, and about a third of the drones, the Ukrainian drones, destroyed about a third of their strategic bomber fleet, which is the
40 planes or something like that, right?
Yeah, huge amount. So fighters, but I think it's like the Tu-98 or something like that. But they're a lot of their big, heavy. They're equivalent to our B-52s. Now they don't build those things anymore. They don't have bomber factories. So this is a real big blow to Russia, and it really does. I mean, so you got to be looking at it if you're a war planner in the United States or any country, China, India, any country that depends on massive, air power like we do, and to a great extent, air power and Navy. That's what we've got, and both of those things, in terms of drones, are potentially vulnerable, as we saw in Russia. Now, so it does speak to a change in warfighting and warfare, and we hope that the U.S. is prepared for that. Now, we have a little bit of a better situation because of our two oceans that separate us from most of the rest of the world, but that's by no means, an iron dome or a golden dome, so to speak. So
planes fly in and out of the United States from all across the world all the time.
All the time. There's
smuggle
millions.
All kinds of stuff, and whatever. So
I think that it does spell that. But the other thing is, we were talking a little bit ago about is this a trigger? I mean, so the war has been going on there for what now, like 3 years? What is it? 3 years?
Yeah, a little over 3 years.
Over
2022. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's been going on for a little over 3 years, and it's been kind of this, horrible back and forth. I mean, Russia apparently has lost about 1 million people so far in the
Ukraine's lost over 750,000 or something like that.
Exactly.
But even hearing those numbers, I mean, you hear them every few months. Like, it's just this kind of dull roar going on in the background that doesn't really get a lot of attention. And then all of a sudden you hear these big numbers, like, okay, well, what do I do with like Stalin said, like, what do you say? A million people is a statistic. One person's a tragedy or something, something like that. Yeah,
exactly.
That's kind of how it is. Like, we know what's going on, but once in a great while you hear these numbers. But like, how do you contextualize that?
Right. Yeah, you really can't. Well, especially for Ukraine's not a huge country. It's it's got. Neither is Russia these days. It's like 140, 150 million, 160, something like that. So, I mean, it's not small, but that's still, to lose 1 million out of that number, that's a pretty big chunk of people.
Yeah.
So that's one interesting thing. The other two interesting things about this are, it appears, other than this, that neither side is interested in peace. I mean, maybe Zelensky is, I don't know, but Putin's not. And the question that I really wonder about right now is, what, I mean, Trump does not look good. In this situation, Trump, and I don't know if you saw his thing today, his tweet today, or his Truth Social post, where he said, "Well, I talked to President Putin, and he did say very certainly he's going to respond," and then he moved on to Iran. I'm like, dude, what's going on here? So, this could be a real, and maybe it's because Trump knows it's a flashpoint, or I don't know.
Well, it feels, again, you know way more about this stuff than I do, but based on my limited knowledge, it feels like we have sent a message to NATO that we're out. That, you guys are going to start paying your own bills. You want to fight this war, fine, but it's your war. It's no longer going to be us fighting your war for you because you want us to. Now, that's my perception. I don't know how much that is accurate, but that's kind of the sense I get. We've sent messages that, because we fund 75% of NATO or something like that. It's whatever the number is. It's a way disproportionate number considering we have 2 oceans,
right?
And we also police the entire shipping lanes of the world. Like, we're doing our part, I would say, right?
Yeah.
So we've sent the message that if you guys really want to have a war with Russia, like, okay, that's gonna be your war, though. It's on you,
right?
And so at the same time, whether because of that or just at the same time as that, Europe is like now calling the shots on what happens over there, and we're calling the shots less. Now, I'm not saying I wouldn't know if like we knew this thing was going to happen or didn't know this thing was happening, but that transition is happening where we're saying we're kind of out, and they're saying, fine, if you're out, we're going to call the shots, right? So it could be that we didn't know. That seems hard for me to believe, given all the NSA and CIA and all that kind of stuff that we have. But stranger things have happened. Russia didn't know, obviously, right?
Sure, yeah.
So we had that dynamic where now it's becoming like out of our control now. Before, like, it was in our control, even though we were doing things that I personally kind of wish we weren't. I wish we weren't sending our military there. I wish we weren't sending our troops there, which there's plenty of reports we have actual guys there firing the rockets that Ukrainians can't fire. Like, we have people actually pulling the trigger on the rockets and stuff. So it's again, kind of like the thing we were talking about earlier. It's becoming its own animal now. It's becoming its own thing that we can't control. And I don't know that I would say that neither one of them are interested in peace. I think neither one of them are interested in being embarrassed or shamed or losing face.
Yeah. Well, that's true. Because I mean, if you think about it, culturally speaking, they're both Slavic. They're both intense, and I'm not saying anything negative about Slavic people. I know plenty of them, but I don't want them to come and beat me up. No, I'm just kidding. So there's pretty intense people, right? And
Putin's the guy who was bare chested on the horse, right? I mean,
exactly.
That says something about your personality.
Exactly, and the way that Zelensky behaved in the Oval Office, he wasn't all that, not great on decor, but that's their personality, and so you've got these 2 guys going at it, and neither of them wants to lose. I mean, whoever loses is probably dead, frankly. I mean, so Zelensky loses, if Ukraine loses, there's no doubt that Russia's going to kill him, and if Putin loses,
or
his generals
they'd be
will get
dead
him.
by their own people in both cases.
Yeah, exactly. One of the two, they'll be gone. And so the other thing that concerns me about this situation is, we talk sometimes about, well, what's the trigger event? Is it a military event? Is it a financial event? Is it a social event? What is it? But I heard an interesting statistic this week about Europe and the United States on the financial side. So in the U.S., we have in retirement accounts, 401ks and IRAs and all that kind of stuff, we have about $9 trillion invested in those kinds of accounts. That's about the same amount of money that Europe has invested in the U.S. stock market. So so in terms of where we are vulnerable, now I'm going to connect this all back, but in terms of where we are vulnerable in terms of trade and finance, we think oftentimes about China, but China has about $1 trillion invested here. Europe has about $9 trillion. Europe has a whole heck of a lot more leverage over the finances here than China does. Now, you connect that with what's happening with the war. Well, if Europe says we have to repatriate a lot of our money because we've got this increase, we're going, Keir Starmer, the PM of Great Britain, I listened to a speech of his yesterday or the day before. He's talking about, I have no life, Brian. This is what I do.
So that's bored. I've been bored before. I don't think I've ever been that bored.
Yeah, it's pretty boring. Listening to a UK PM, but he's talking about how we have to prepare for war fighting. I mean, these are things. He is a liberal. PM, and he's talking like he's conservative. So if Europe has to fund all this stuff, and they can't fund it even now. I mean, they want to go to 5% of their GDP. I think the UK is talking about 3.5% or something like that. They might have to repatriate the money. Now, what happens in the U.S. if our largest deposits in the U.S. go away in a short period of time, 6 months or a year? I mean, not all $9 trillion would go away. Say $4 trillion went away. That would crash our economy. That would basically crash the U.S. economy. So because of what's happening in war there, that could have this secondary effect.
And as you and I have talked about, like when we did the Mike Benz video that we went through, the purpose of the deep state or the blob or whatever, their purpose has become protecting U.S. corporate interests and keeping those companies profitable. Then you take all the things you just said, which I know some about. I don't know the detail you do. Then you add in Japan. Japan is like our biggest bond holder, I think, and they have trillions of dollars invested in our stock market. Well, same thing. They're facing a currency crisis.
Yes.
To fix their currency crisis, they would have to repatriate some of their money and raise their interest rates and get people to buy their bonds instead of buying our stocks.
Right.
So okay, I'm gonna war plan this like I was the president, and I'm Trump. I came in, I'm 120 days into the presidency. I have to roll 38% or 37% of our national debt, $9 trillion or so. I have to refinance this year. Interest rates are at the highest they've been in a while. They're 5%, 4.5%, whatever. Or I get something bad happen to the equity market, and then bonds become attractive again, and the interest rates would go down, and I could refinance it, let's say 3% or 4%, or whatever. I'm not an economist. I don't know what the numbers would be, but at a much lower interest rate. Right. So what I would be looking for is a way to have the stock market crash, but it not be my fault.
Right. Yeah. So you can refinance the debt, and that would be a logical plan, right?
Right. Refinance the debt. Have a restructuring of the economy where we import the manufacturing, all the stuff that he's talking about. I'm in favor of a lot of that stuff, right? Let's get our jobs here. Let's make medicine here. I think that's a pretty wise thing to do. For
decision,
example, right? And we have all this debt we got to refinance. It would save us billions and tens of billions or hundreds of billions of dollars, whatever, trillions, whatever a year to refinance at the lower rate. Well, to do that, you have to sacrifice the stock market.
Yeah.
But I don't want to be the guy who's blamed for that. Trump certainly does not want to be the guy who's blamed for that. New York business guy. I mean, can you imagine? I mean, geez, that's just not. But if I can play Jenga just right, where the thing collapses, but it's not my fault, then I get everything I want.
Well, if he could do that, he would be the master strategist that everybody says he's playing 5D chess and all that kind of stuff. That would be pretty amazing.
I don't think it's as much 5D chess as it is like driving a car into the China shop and just like bolting before he knows what it's
right. It's just, that presents all sorts of meme ideas, I think. So, yeah, no, that would be that you're exactly right. I think the problem is that things are so insanely complex right now, and the system is too complex. Even if he got it right, even if somebody gets it right, the system is too complex in its current form to survive.
Except for let me push back a little bit. When you're in a time of complexity, extreme complexity,
sure,
there comes a point where things get really simple.
Oh, sure, yeah,
right. Let's take a divorce. You got kids, you got jobs, you got family, you got friends. Who's going to get this friend? Who's going to get that friend? And we can't get along, but we're miserable together. But we if we're apart, like there's all these factors, right?
Right.
All these it's very complex situation. And then there's a moment where it gets really simple.
Right. Well, yes, absolutely.
I think this is kind of the same thing. It's so complex until it can't be complex anymore. Then it gets very simple and binary.
Well, it usually gets simple and binary when, like the building collapses and there's nothing but dust left, right? Dust is the most simple thing around. It's kind of like, Mount Etna. It's got all this beautiful stuff. Now you've just got a pile of dust of hot rocks, right? So that's.
But when it's so complex, you can't navigate the complexity.
Yeah.
Then there's only one solution, which is simplicity.
Yeah, that's true.
And the opposite is also true. When you have a period of long simplicity, the natural outcome is going to be more complexity. We make all these things hard, and they are. Right. But when you zenith as a society or your career or whatever, there's only one place to go.
That's right. That's exactly right.
That's just how it works.
Yeah, that's how the universe works. And I think if anything, if we can communicate anything to Kenny G, it's these are the principles that work regardless of what the technologies are that are involved in them, regardless of the what the hairstyles are, or the fashion styles, or the entertainment or whatever. So that's what's.
I heard a new saying. This is completely off topic, but I'll mentioning like what Kenny G can learn from this. I heard a new saying, and I'm gonna butcher it because I didn't write it down, but like you and I always talk about how gravity wins, right?
Right.
Reality always wins.
Yep.
This person said, reality is always the last to play their hand.
Yes.
Like,
that's
man,
good.
Is that like you can avoid it, but it essentially the same kind of thing you and I are saying. But I was like, man, that's an interesting way to look at that. And
that is a good way to look at it. That's a very good way to look at it.
So you got Russia loses these 40 planes and like $50 billion, or that could be backwards, maybe 50 planes and 40 billion, whatever the number is. But here's one of the things I found most fascinating out of that specific attack, right? So first of all, the drones, which you'll get into the technology on the drones, but the reason the planes were available. Do you know the reason the planes were available like that? Like
no.
Why they were parked on the runway in perfect whatever the word is, consecutive order or whatever.
Yeah.
Like they're parked out in front of the hangars,
right
near the tarmac, in the line, right, all facing the same way, very neatly white. The reason for that is because one of the treaties we signed with them was all nuclear capable airplanes must be parked where they're visible, so the enemy can see with their satellites if they're nuclear armed or not. So if you park them in a hangar, you're violating the treaty. So this is why I think, okay, maybe Ukraine didn't know, or we didn't know about this attack, because I suspect we would have said, hey guys, you can't violate that treaty. It's been in place for 40 years.
Yeah.
This is one of the principal things that keeps us, from, bad things or an uncertainty of what could happen. So again, this is all stuff I've heard on various sources. So I can't prove 100% it's true, but it makes sense. They violate that treaty that requires that both of us keep our nuclear capable planes out in the view.
Right.
They violate that to pull this attack off.
Interesting. Yeah. And therefore we have some culpability because of our treaty, Yeah.
Well, it's just another example that this thing now has a life of its own.
Yeah.
Right? So that happened on Sunday, I think. Was it Sunday?
I think today's.
Yeah. Because Monday I was checking the news regularly, which I don't normally do, but I was literally waiting for any moment the news to be like Russia did a thing that was really bad and ugly.
Yeah.
And it never came. Here it is. You and I were talking on Wednesday. It's eerily quiet. Does that make sense?
It does. I mean, well, and it would have been, from my perspective, sort of a relief if they immediately struck back.
like the Iran thing to the Iron Dome. We're going to send our crummy missiles over there. We know we're going to do anything, but we can save face by saying we did a thing.
Right. So it would be less dangerous if they immediately struck back. On the flip side, if they're taking time to think, okay, well, how far? I mean, Putin has been a brinksman. I mean, he's played this brinksmanship game. In every U.S. president he's played it against, he's won. Frankly, I mean, he's which is unfortunate. But he's also
he was supposed to die of cancer like 25 years ago. Like he's convinced the world that he's on his deathbed or something.
And he's been at he also a weakness of our system versus autocracies, right, is that the dictators can stay in power as long as they want. So Putin has been in power even when Putin wasn't the president, for ostensibly speaking, when Medvedev was, he was still the guy pulling the strings. So he's got a lot of experience in how to deal with Americans and all that. And I am by no means a Putin fan, so no praise is intentional here.
Whatever. Everybody knows that's a dog whistle for you. Love him.
Yeah, no. That's right. But it seems interesting to me that it's taking this long, because that seems to me to be more ominous. I mean, it could very well be that, okay, well, let's move some battlefield nukes, and we're not going to use ICBMs, but nuclear weapons are not just intercontinental ballistic missiles with MIRVs on the end. The battlefield nukes can do a heck of a lot of damage. Maybe they will pick some Ukrainian city and they'll just vaporize the entire thing and say, well, this is as far as we're going to go. If you ever want to read an interesting book, there's along these same lines. It's a book called 2032. It's by Admiral James Stavridis. He posits the idea of a war between the U.S. and China. Anyway, one of the things that
5 years ago, when you and I very first started talking about these kinds of topics, not planning to do a podcast, actually, it was when I told you about the fourth turning.
Oh, yeah.
You were telling me about this book where he kind of war gamed out what
that's right. That's right. Good memory, Brian. I'll have to drink what coffee you're drinking.
Well, when you're youthful like me, those things happen.
Well, yeah, it's way past time for me. But the interesting thing about this, in how it relates to this particular situation, is he talks about the escalation. So, in that book, Singapore accidentally gets nuked, and therefore the Chinese take a very similar size city in the U.S. and nuke that. Okay, well, that's as far as we're going to escalate. But kind of keeps climbing. And so that's the danger here, is that, okay, there's been escalation. They always talk about escalation in warfighting. There's been escalation by Ukraine, you could say. I mean, I can't blame them. If you can take out a bunch of Russian military targets, go for it. It's makes sense. But what is Russia's escalatory response to that? And I can't see it being anything other than, I mean, Ukraine doesn't have big installations like that. They can, take out some southern city and say, well, it's tit for tat.
When you have all these complexities, but if you simplify it, you're Putin, your fingers on the button. This array of buttons with varying degrees of nastiness attached to each one. What do you do if you're him? If you don't retaliate, you might be dead.
Yeah.
You might be removed at best and exiled to what's that, Bulgaria or
Siberia,
Belarus, right?
Oh, Belarus. Okay.
Best case scenario, you're taken out of power and ostracized. That seems pretty unlikely.
Right.
What's more likely is you're just taken out, right? So again, we have all these complexities, but really it's pretty simple. What's a guy with that kind of ego, that kind of pride, that kind of mindset? What's he going to do in this situation? And that's what's going to happen. It's not that complicated.
No, you're right.
And it begins the sequence of events where it becomes its own animal, and then now we've lost control of it again. Like all these things. We're talking about AI, the economy, war in the Middle East, our trade agreements. Like again, the tinderboxes. Like there's all these things that are on the cusp or already have taken on a life of their own, where they're out of our control. And again, I go back to the person living 2 miles away from Auschwitz. How could you not do anything? That was a predicate for me wanting to do this kind of podcast, was just to figure out, why would people not do something there? And what I'm coming to realize is, what the hell are we supposed to do?
Yeah, there's nothing to do. There's nothing you can do. The only thing you can do is be personally prepared as best you can for, difficult times to come.
So what do you make? One of the things that was exposed in this attack was the shift in warfare, the technology warfare. So, in World War I, airplanes had just been around for a dozen years or whatever it was. I can't remember what Kitty Hawk was, 1903 or 1904 or something like that.
1900s, yeah.
And then 1917, 14 years later, the Red Baron and all that stuff, airplanes won and lost the war.
Yep.
Then you fast forward to World War II, and kind of since then, it's been aircraft carriers.
Right.
I began the era of aircraft carriers being the predominant military force, and of course, nuclear weapons. I'm not overlooking that, but if we could avoid that, I'd be in favor of that. And now it feels like a very big change of all those big hunks of machinery that take years and billions of dollars to build are being neutralized by $37 drones.
Yeah, that's I think between cyber warfare, between which you're taking these people and putting them in rooms and getting them satellite access so they can access just about anything in the world. So you've got cyber warfare, you've got drone warfare. It's very much smaller packages, because like what does an F-22 or an F-35 cost? I mean, they're hugely expensive, and now they're talking about.
I think they're 100 billion plus each.
Yeah, for a fighter jet. Exactly.
Yeah,
for a fighter jet. And can you imagine if a swarm of drones, if several $100 took out? I mean, what Ukraine did in Russia is hugely costly for them because they don't have the ability to replace all those things. The only thing that they can do, and this is likely what's going to happen, the only thing they can do is they can start adopting Chinese technology. They can start buying weapons from China because China has the ability to build. I mean, they're on a military buildup like there's no tomorrow.
Well, and they don't have the restrictions for drone building that we do, where you have to be able to see that you can't fly them if they're out of sight and things, all these rules that we have that I'm not saying they're good or bad. I don't know that much about the rules, but why they're in place and whether they're good or I don't know that part, but I do know that China doesn't have those restrictions.
Right. Exactly.
And so they're far ahead of us on the drone side. Now on the AI side, which I would put up there with, the technology pieces like hacking, and then the drone piece, and you got the AI piece.
Absolutely.
Again, and these are all things that are getting out of control and taking on a life of their own.
Yeah.
Right?
And the other thing that's interesting about how they're happening in China versus here, when you remember when DeepSeek, it was that Chinese AI model came out, it wasn't that the thing was so super powerful that it was better than anything we had. It's that they were able to do it in a small, cheap way compared to what we do. So it exposes, and they've had some other recent innovations similar to that, where they've been able to do stuff with, we've got all these chip export controls for NVIDIA chips and these high-powered GPUs and such. And the reason is because, you can't do AI without them. Well, it turns out that they're able to do AI on a much more humble basis and achieve the same kind of results. So, which is Western thinking versus what they're constrained with. We think
theirs use way less power and way less sophistication, which are two things that we have a plethora of: power and sophistication.
Exactly. Right? And that puts us in a dangerous spot because you can throw tons of drones. You could throw millions and millions of drones at something, and I don't care how many F-35s you've got. I mean, not that they're obsolete, but that's a different warfighting.
I saw a video, and again, I don't know if it was AI created or not, but it doesn't matter. The video was showing like a guy in the back of a Jeep going over a bridge, like in one of those old iron bridges where when your car goes under, you look up and you see the iron girders and stuff like that kind of thing. And he's trying to shoot with a machine gun hundreds or thousands of drones.
Right.
Like, how do you even it was just an impossible feat. It was like the hardest video game you ever saw ever. Like the insurmountable number of drones, and his life is on the line. Like, this is not a video game. It's like his life, but you only have so many bullets. You only have so much visibility. You only have so much reflex time. And there was so many of them. It was unbelievable.
Yeah.
And these guys didn't even know which direction to look. The sky was covered with them.
So between all those technologies, and the one we didn't mention is space technology, because space is already militarized. I mean, the Chinese were recently complaining about something we put up in space. Well, they got all sorts of 100 killer satellites in space already. So, go pound sand, dudes. But, so you combine all of those four things. And again, the complexity level of them on one hand, but the simplicity of them on the other hand, that Ukraine could do this to Russia really points to, and you better bet that China and everybody else was watching that and saying, what can we learn from this? I mean, I'm sure our war planners were looking at it and thinking, on one hand, we're complaining, well, we didn't know, maybe they knew, maybe they didn't. But on the other hand, they're saying, wow, that's pretty cool,
Yeah. Well, it was certainly educational. I mean, just like the when we started World War II, we did not intend for aircraft carriers to become the predominant force.
Right.
It was happenstance.
Yeah.
But they did. And then we've had a 80-year era where that's been the case. And that era seems to be coming to a close like many other things that we're seeing.
Well, and hopefully we can make the changes fast enough.
What's that?
Hopefully we can make the changes fast enough to this new warfighting strategy. I mean, I believe we got smart people there, but you just hope that they can, because the conflict is coming.
Yeah. Well, the best news today is we found your tagline for when you run for political office, which is "Go Pound Sand's dudes." Go Pound Sand dudes.
Hey, I think that's a very populist. I'd go with that.
I mean, I gotta say that probably at least 32% of the people would vote for that just based on the tagline. So
Absolutely. Well, I'll expect your donation check in the mail, Brian.
Well, right after I get my $20 million for helping the Democrats speak to men, that you can be assured that check will be on the way.
I'll hold my breath.
All right. Well, as Dave mentioned in the beginning, we're trying to explain what this moment in time is like, and we'd love to get your input. If you think there's something we got especially right or especially wrong, we'd love to hear about it. You can go to unsilentpodcast.com, or Rumble has a great comment section. Until next week, this is Dave and Brian signing off.
See you next week.
Do you want to be unsilent? Make your voice heard on our social media channels and share where you think we got it right or wrong. Go to unsilentpodcast.com for social links so you can join the discussion.